Hotels in the area are completely sold out. Parking lots are packed. I mean, why do you think that there's so much excitement surrounding this launch? Because this is not a typical day at the Space Coast.
It's the biggest rocket in the world by far. It's like the first time something exciting has happened in rocket launch in a very long time, apart from, our boosters landing. Whether the rocket succeeds or fails, it's going to be exciting. People are coming from all around the world to see what will either be a great rocket launch or the best fireworks display they've ever seen.
When you guys were first trying to land the booster from Falcon 9, you likened the difficulty level to balancing a rubber broomstick on your hand in the middle of a windstorm.
Right.
So how would you categorize the difficulty level of this launch?
Well, it's kind of like balancing 3 rubber broomsticks in a windstorm. So the most thing I'm most worried about on ascent is that you've got these 3 rockets which are, even though they look stiff, they're kind of floppy under these high loads. So you could have the bodies bending and smacking into each other. You've got unbelievable sound levels and vibration levels. 5 million pounds of thrust is 18 747s at full blast.
Yeah,
so
that's
this is
a
really crazy amount of power going through this, and it's really a miracle that that rocket holds together at all. The separation system that tosses off the side boosters has never been tested before in space, so that's going to be a big deal for that to work. And then, even once it's in orbit, it's going to be the longest coast mission we've ever done. So it's going to be coasting for 6 hours in just blackest space, deep in a vacuum. At 3 degrees above absolute zero on one side, searing heat on the other. So you could have vaporization of oxygen, you could have the fuel freeze, and so that's all before. Yeah, a lot could go wrong.
A lot of firsts happening tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of firsts.
So what would a success or possible failure of this launch mean for SpaceX?
Well, I think let's focus on the success.
Right, think positive.
The success part is it means that we'll have a rocket that can carry the biggest satellites in the world. In fact, people can actually make even bigger satellites than before. We could, if we wanted, take a Crew Dragon that's under development and send people on a loop around the moon and actually go further than they went in Apollo. These are all possible with Falcon Heavy.
Washington is paying very close attention to this launch. Even Mike Pence's chief of staff tweeted that a successful launch could have, quote, major positive ramifications for the U.S. space industry.
Right.
So what do you think those ramifications could look like?
Apart from the obvious stuff like providing competition for national security space launches, it will mean that there's a U.S. heavy lift rocket that's the most competitive in the world. Our rocket will cost about half as much as other heavy lift rockets from Russia, Europe, and China, and be able to do twice as much payload.
What will this mean, though, for the government's own heavy lift rocket program, SLS?
Well, I think it's going to give the government options. So it's good to have options for advancement of human spaceflight, and the competition.
America's private space program made another giant leap today. The Falcon Heavy SpaceX rocket blasted off from the launch pad once used for moon missions, and new dreams of astronauts exploring deep space were reignited. Manuel Bajorquez is at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
4, 3, 2, 1.
The Falcon Heavy, the most powerful rocket in the world, lifted off and streaked across the sky as it climbed toward outer space.
Yeah, there it is.
The roar of its 27 engines matched only by the crowd. But the show in the sky wasn't over.
Side boosters deeper.
The rocket's boosters detached. And minutes later, 2 of them could be seen descending back to Earth, landing in tandem near the launch site. While the payload, a Tesla Roadster with a dummy named Starman, hurtled away from Earth and toward the orbit of Mars, to the sounds of what else? David Bowie's Life on Mars. A message on the car's circuit board says, made on Earth by humans. The Falcon Heavy combines the power of 3 rockets into one that can carry bigger satellites and equipment, and eventually humans, deeper into space. SpaceX founder and CEO Elon Musk spoke about the possibilities with CBS News space analyst Bill Harwood.
You could actually send people back to the moon with the Falcon Heavy. You could, with orbital refueling, send people to Mars.
Both goals of the U.S. government and missions Musk is eager to leave his mark on, and his brand.
We're just trying to make space exciting again and try to push the frontier back to where it was.
But the mission is not over yet. The final phase of the rocket involves firing the engines one more time in order to thrust the car and Starman toward their intended orbit. Jeff?
We will be watching. Manuel Bajorquez, thank you very much.
Since they're not Block 5 or version 5, we weren't planning on reusing any of the cores. The upper stage seems to have worked perfectly so far. The 2 burns were executed correctly, and now we'll see if the upper stage avionics survive quite an arduous trip through the Van Allen belts. Normally, the stage will pass very quickly through the Van Allen belts. Here, it's essentially dwelling there for several hours, and then it's going to do a restart, deplete its propellant, and go to transmars injection. And the propellant levels all look good. The propellant, after the second burn of the upper stage, we were only 0.3 sigma away from predictions, so which is basically very minor. So it has plenty of propellant to complete the transmars injection, assuming that the fuel doesn't freeze and the oxygen doesn't boil off and the electronics don't get fried. So those are the issues. We'll find out in a few hours if that burn is successful. I don't think there's anything else I know that's worth mentioning. I went out to the landing zone, took a look at the side boosters. They look in really good condition. So they're both reflyable, although, as I said, they're combination of version 3 and version 4. So we're only going to be reflying really version 5 at this point. That launches shortly, and that'll be our mainstay. We'll stick to version 5 for the Falcon architecture. We don't expect to have a version 6. All right, any questions that I haven't answered? I'll do my best to answer them, but I'm not sure if I have the information yet, but I'll try.
So we're going to start in the room, and the first question goes to David Curley from ABC News.
Elon, spectacular. What did you learn? What did Falcon Heavy teach you?
It taught me like crazy things can come true. Because he'd said like I didn't really think this would work. Because when I see the rocket lift off, I see like 1,000 things that could not work, and it's amazing when they do. And I was really seeing the 2 boosters land synchronized, really just like the simulation. I mean, it makes me think like that could be quite a scalable approach. You know, you could imagine large numbers of those just coming in, landing, taking off, landing, doing many flights per day. So I think it gives me a lot of faith for our next architecture, the sort of the interplanetary spaceship. You have different names for it, but BFR is kind of the code name. And it gives me confidence that BFR is really quite workable. But I was actually looking at the side boosters and like, they're pretty big, you know, they're 16 stories tall, 60-foot leg span. But we need to be way bigger than that. So I think it's given me a lot of confidence that we can make the BFR design work. Yeah, it's. I mean, I have tremendous confidence, obviously, in the SpaceX team. So I think we can really do this a lot, you know, and keep advancing the technology to achieve full and rapid reusability, which would have a profound effect on the future. And one of the interesting things about, say, Falcon Heavy versus Falcon 9 is that Falcon Heavy has the same level of expendability as Falcon 9. So if you look at, say, the price of Falcon 9 is $60 million, Falcon Heavy is 90, even though it's got 3 times as much capability. Because in both cases, the only thing that's expended is the upper stage. We're going to start recovering the fairings, the big nose cone. We're going to recover that, recover the boosters. And so there's really, the cost difference really between a Falcon 9 and a Falcon Heavy is minor.
The next question from Marcia Dunn at Associated Press.
Marcia Dunn, AP. What was going through your mind? How amazed were you to see your roadster up there with Starman just cruising along with the Blue Planet? And how long will we be getting live views, do you think, from the car?
Well, I think it looks so ridiculous and impossible. And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. Like, we'd have way better CGI if it was fake. And you know, the colors all look kind of weird in space. There's no atmospheric occlusion. You know, like everything looks too crisp. But we know we didn't really test any of those materials for, you know, is it space hardened or whatever, you know. So it just has the same seats that like a normal car has. It's just literally a normal car in space, which I kind of like the absurdity of that. And if you look closely, on the dashboard, there's a tiny roadster with a tiny spaceman. So, because Hot Wheels made a Hot Wheels roadster, and a friend of mine suggested, hey, why don't you put that Hot Wheels roadster with a tiny spaceman on the, you know, in the car too? I'm like, that'd be cool. Sure. So we did that. I mean, it's kind of silly and fun, but I think that's, you know, silly, fun things are important. And normally, for a new rocket, you know, they'd launch like a block of concrete or something like that. I mean, that's so boring. And I think that's just the imagery of it is something that's going to get people excited around the world. And it's still tripping me out. I mean, I'm tripping balls here.
Nick, next question in the room. How about Brendan Byrne from WMFE, the NPR affiliate in Orlando?
Yeah, congratulations, Elon. Great launch today. Where do you see the Falcon Heavy fitting into this launch industry? Is this something that is going to be for more national security? You see this for interplanetary missions? What's the future of Falcon Heavy?
Yeah, the great thing is, like, so Falcon Heavy opens up a new class of payload. So it can launch more than twice as much payload as any other rocket in the world. So it's kind of up to customers what they might want to launch. But it can launch things direct to Pluto and beyond. You know, no stop needed. You don't even need like a gravity assist or anything. And it can launch giant satellites. It can do anything you want. You could go back. You could send people back to the moon with a bunch of, you know, if you did a bunch of launches of Falcon Heavy and did an orbital refilling. The two or three Falcon Heavies, you know, would equal the payload of a Saturn V. But I wouldn't recommend doing that because I think the new architecture, BFR architecture, is the way to go. But I think it's going to open up a sense of possibility. I think it's going to encourage other companies and countries to say, hey, if SpaceX, which is a commercial company, can do this, and nobody paid for Falcon Heavy, it was paid for with internal funds, then they could do it too. So I think it's going to encourage other countries and companies to raise their sights and say, hey, we can do bigger and better, which is great. We want a new space race. Space races are exciting.
How about one more in the room? How about Daryl Neal from the Fox affiliate here in Orlando?
Mr. Musk, kind of talk us through your thought process as you were watching the launch. You said you were incredibly concerned about it. Just, you know, you just wanted to clear the pad because it kind of set expectations low. So talk me through as you were watching it.
Yeah, I think this is true of anyone who's involved in, you know, closely in the design of something. You know all the ways they can fail, and that's like the sort of mental checklist that's scrolling through your mind. Is all the things that can break. I mean, there's thousands of things that can go wrong, and everything has to go right once the rocket lifts off. There's no opportunity to do a recall or upload a software fix or anything like that. It's either passing grade is 100%, at least for the ascent phase. Yeah, I've seen rockets blow up so many different ways. So, you know, it's a big relief when it actually works.
One more question in the room, and then
I bet the first, you know, when they first, whoever's like, you know, when they're like first launched like a 747 or DC-3 or something like that, I bet the chief engineer was like, I can't believe that thing's flying.
One more in the room, and then we'll go to the phone. How about Irene Klotz from Aviation Week? Irene? We need to have you on mic first for the folks on the phone to hear.
Thanks. I can hold it. Okay. Thanks, Irene Klotz with Aviation Week. Congratulations. Can you talk to us a little bit about what needs to happen to certify Falcon Heavy for the national security missions, how far along you are in that process, and how many flights you might need to do, and also if you're able to say anything about how much your SpaceX's investment to get to the rocket to this point. Thanks.
I think we only need, I think there's I'm not, it just depends on which national security mission that we'd need to, you know, how many flights depends on which mission. But we have a number of commercial customers for Falcon Heavy. So I think, I really don't think it's going to be in any way an impediment to acceptance of national security missions. Because we'll be doing several Falcon Heavy missions, flights per year. So let's say if there's a big national security satellite that's due for launch in 3 or 4 years, we probably have like a dozen or more launches done by then. So it won't really, I don't think there'll be a launch number that's an inhibitor on national security stuff. Yeah, so, and then we've got the STP mission that's coming up, which is another test mission. That'll go on where everything's on Block 5, version 5 of the rocket. And then we'll be launching version 5 or Block 5 single stick in a couple months. So I think it's hopefully smooth sailing for qualification for national security missions. Our investment to date, probably a lot more than I'd like to admit. You know, we try to cancel the Falcon Heavy program 3 times at SpaceX. Because it's like, man, this is way harder than we thought. Because the initial idea was just like, oh, you know, you stick on two first stages of side boosters, how hard can it be? It's like, it's way hard. We had to redesign the center core completely. We had to redesign the grid fins, because it's a long story, but if you've got a nose cone on the end of at the end of the booster instead of a cylinder, you lose control authority. Because if you've got a cylinder, you can kind of bounce the air off of the rocket, and you get like a 50% or more increased control authority if you've got a cylindrical section instead of an ogive section at the end of the booster. So we had to redesign the grid fins, redesign the control system, massively redesign the thrust structure at the base to take way more load. That center booster's got to deal with over 1 million pounds of load coming in combined from the side boosters. So it ends up being heavier. So the center core is basically a complete redesign. And even the side boosters, there's a pretty large number of parts that change. And then the launch site itself needs to change a lot. I'm guessing our total investment is over $500 million. Probably more. Yeah.
I'd like to take some questions from the phone. I think the first one up is Dan Vergano from BuzzFeed News. Is that right?
That's right. Dan Vergano, BuzzFeed News. Could you talk a little bit about the decision to have the 2 side cores come down at the same time? Is that just the way it falls out from the physics, or was that an actual decision you made?
We did offset them slightly, but really they pretty much just come down. There's no, we wanted them to offset slightly just so that the radars didn't interfere. And we actually wanted no communication between the two stages. They're both going to a point in absolute space. And we're just worried that the radar reflection of one would be seen by the radar receiver of the other. But no, that's just kind of how it happened. It's actually meant to happen just like that.
The next question on the phone comes from Keith Cowing at NASA Watch.
First of all, congratulations. You've launched a rather unconventional payload into space, one that's generated a lot of buzz. And there's a lot of people, some of them citizen scientists, some of them they're just newbies when it comes to tracking things in space. They're going to try and track the Tesla and understand what's happening to it. You know, like that movie, Dude, Where's My Car? And other than the live webcam today, what is SpaceX going to do to interact with this community of Tesla trackers once the car leaves orbit? Do you have a plan, or are you just going to kind of wait and see what bubbles up on the internet and react to it?
We don't have a plan. No plan. The battery is going to last about 12 hours from launch, roughly. And after that, it's just going to be out there in deep space for maybe millions or billions of years, who knows. Yeah, maybe discovered by some future alien race, thinking, what the heck, what were these guys doing? Did they worship this car? Why do they have a little car in the car? That'll really confuse them. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I think it's kind of a fun thing, and I sure hope that next burn works, by the way. We'll know in a few hours.
Now we're going to go back to the room, if that's okay. So how about Chris Davenport from the Washington Post? If Chris, you could wait until we get you mic'd.
Thanks. So now that you're focusing more on the BFR, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the timeline. I know you said it's coming along faster, and then what that means for your plans for Mars and the moon.
Well, I don't want to get too off topic, but I think we might, if we get lucky, we'll be able to do short hopper flights with the spaceship part of BFR, maybe next year.
All right, one more in the room. Let's see, how about Bill Harwood from CBS?
Thanks, Bill Harwood, CBS. Elon, two really quick ones. You mentioned the drone ship, a couple of thrusters got. Did the thing land on the ship or nearby?
No, so
and I
want to take any information I give with regard to this with a bit of a grain of salt, because I'll tell you the information that I have. What that information I have may be incorrect. It could be way off. So the information I received was that we hit the water at about 300 miles an hour, 500 kilometers, roughly 500 kilometers an hour. So that's hard, and about 100 meters away from the ship. So, which was enough to take out 2 thrusters and shower the deck with shrapnel.
Well, and you mentioned the burn coming up. Can you give us any sense of, I know you're burning to depletion. I mean, how long a burn are we talking about? And when you hope to have some confirmation to be able to tell us that it did or didn't work? Thanks.
Actually, I don't have the number length of burn offhand. I was just looking at the profound residual sigma, which is like the key number. It's a decently long burn though. Maybe a minute or so. That'll be in a few hours, hopefully. I actually don't have the latest telemetry because I was just out at the landing zone, and haven't been back to launch control since going to landing zone. So I don't have the latest information on the status of the upper stage.
Tom Costello from NBC News, please. Right here on the front row, blue jacket.
Well, congratulations again. I wanted to follow up on Chris's question, because Chris asked you what's your timeline potentially to go to the moon or Mars, and you said, did you say as soon as next year? Can you quantify that? And then I had my real question. I'm just doing Chris's work here.
Sure, yeah.
But
yeah. Well, the by hopper tests, I mean kind of like we had the Grasshopper program for Falcon 9, where we just had the rocket take off and land in Texas, at our Texas test site. So that would be, we'll either do that at our South Texas launch site near Brownsville, or do ship to ship. We're not sure yet whether ship to ship or Brownsville, but most likely it's going to happen at our Brownsville location, because we've got a lot of land with nobody around. So if it blows up, it's cool. But by hopper test, I mean it'll go up, several miles and then come down. The ship is capable of a single stage to orbit if you fully load the tanks. So then we'll do flights of increasing complexity. We really want to test the heat shield material. Something like fly out, turn around, accelerate back real hard, and come in hot to test the heat shield. Because we want to have a highly reusable heat shield that's capable of absorbing the heat from interplanetary entry velocities. So it's really tricky.
The potential to go to Moon or Mars? What's your timeline there?
Yeah. So there are a lot of uncertainties on this program, but it is going to be our focus after, now that we're almost done with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. We're going to level off, as I said, at Block 5 of version 5. So there won't be any more major versions of Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy. Dragon is also going to level off at Dragon version 2. There might be like point releases, 5.1 or Dragon 2.1 or something like that. But most of our engineering resources will be dedicated to VFR, and so I think that will make things go quite quickly. The ship part is by far the hardest, because that's going to come in from superorbital velocities, like Mars transfer velocities, Moon transfer velocities. These are way harder than coming in from low Earth orbit. I mean, there's some of the heating things that scale to the 8th power, which I didn't realize there's anything that scales to the 8th power. But it turns out certain elements of re-entry heating scale to the 8th. So just testing that ship out is the real tricky part. The booster, I think, I don't want to get complacent, but I think we understand reusable boosters. Reusable spaceships that can land propulsively, that's harder. So we're starting with the hard part first. I don't know, I think it's conceivable that we do our first test flight in 3 or 4 years of a full up orbital test flight, including the booster. Oh no, we'd go to low Earth orbit first, but it would be capable of going to the Moon shortly thereafter. It's designed to do that.
Elon, we want to be sensitive to your time. How many more questions you want to take, or how much time
maybe
do you have?
two more questions, maybe?
Okay, sure. There is a gentleman who came from our Reddit community that I want to definitely call on, and I don't know your Reddit handle, and I don't want to say your name. So you can introduce yourself with your name or your handle.
Hi, Elon. My name is Martin Avignon, and I'm with Reddit's our SpaceX community. I'd like to congratulate you as well, as so many people have done just now. I'd like to know about Starman's spacesuit. Is it a production model? Is it instrumented and/or pressurized? And what's holding him up?
Well, there's a mannequin inside, so it's just basically stuffed. But yeah, that is the actual production design. So the real one looks just like that. That in fact, that's one of the qualification articles. That's the real deal. Yeah, I figure if you're gonna go, I mean, it's dangerous. It's a dangerous trip. You want to look good, Man, it took us 3 years to design that spacesuit. It was real hard. It's easy to make a spacesuit that looks good, but doesn't work, or that works but doesn't look good. It's really difficult to make a spacesuit that looks good and works, and you have to make it a multi-part process, and it was surprisingly difficult, very difficult.
How about Dave Musher from Business Insider? Right there.
Hi, Dave Mosher from Business Insider. Thank you so much for doing this, by the way. I want to go back to BFR for a second, since you were talking about that, and also Starman, which is such an inspirational thing that's happening. Have you given any thought to what you might do with BFR in that way? What is the payload, and any thoughts to that?
No, no idea. Suggestions are welcome. I mean, it's a beast. So, the BFR 9-meter diameter, 30 feet roughly diameter, which is, you can fit a lot in 30 feet diameter. 110, 120 meters long. Yeah, big. Although, I bet it doesn't look that big after a while. Yeah. All right, maybe a couple more. Yeah, sure, one more.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. How about Tim Fernholz from Quartz on the back of the white shirt?
Hi, Elon. Thanks again for doing this. Two questions for you. One just about fairing recovery. Just curious how SpaceX is coming with that. And two, Jeff Bezos just responded to your tweet congratulating you on your launch today. You just mentioned a minute ago that we need a new space race. I'm just curious if you see yourself in a race with Blue Origin.
What was the first part of the question?
Checking in on fairing recovery.
Yeah. So if fairing recovery has proven surprisingly difficult. I'm pretty sure we'll solve fairing recovery in the next 6 months. But it turns out, like, you pop the parachute in the fairing, you've got this giant awkward thing. It tends to interfere with the airflow on the parachute, and gets all twisty, and obviously it was a low priority too. Also, we have fairing version 2, which is that's the important one that we want to recover. So even if we recovered fairing version 1, we wouldn't be reflying it in the future. So fairing 2 and recovery, that's very important. And my guess is next 6 months we figure out fairing recovery. And we've got a special boat to catch the fairing. It's like a catcher's mitt. It's like a giant catcher's mitt in boat form. It's going to run around and catch the fairing, actually. It's kind of fun. I think we might be able to do the same thing with Dragon. So if NASA wants us to, we could try to catch Dragon. Literally, it's meant for the fairing, but it would work on Dragon too.
In the room, how about James Dean from Florida Today?
Thanks so much, Elon. James Dean, Florida Today. Speaking of those Dragons, could you give us a status on commercial crew and when we might realistically see an astronaut just getting to low Earth orbit, much less the Moon or Mars?
Yeah, we're making great progress on Crew Dragon, or Dragon version 2. That's actually, in terms of company priorities, obviously mission assurance is always number one as a priority, but then the priority used to be Falcon 9 Block 5, and then a month ago I said absolute priority is Crew Dragon. So we're pretty much done with Falcon 9 Block 5 or version 5. Pretty much almost done with Falcon Heavy. There's a few tweaks that would occur with Falcon Heavy Block 5, but they're minor. And so it's all hands on deck for Crew Dragon. And our goal is we're aspiring to fly Crew to orbit at the end of this year. That's our goal. I think the hardware will be ready.
We have time for one more question in the room.
And I was just looking at Falcon 9. It's like, yeah, kind of small.
So we're going to have to wrap it, and I'd like for Chris Gephardt, please, to have the last question.
Question in terms of the next Falcon Heavy, which is that Arabsat or the one for the Air Force. Do you have any idea of how Pad A held up from today's launch, and how quickly can it be changed?
Pad looks good.
Pad looks
in
good.
Shape. Yeah.
So then I guess my questions are, How quickly can the pad be reconfigured between Heavy and Falcon 9 since you need that pad for both?
Oh, real fast. It's no problem.
Okay.
Going back and forth. It's designed that way.
And
So-
for the Block 5 version of the Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy, does the Falcon Heavy need a dedicated core built for it, or the Block? It does. Okay.
It does. The center core needs to be dedicated. Okay. Yeah. So the center core is a special build. The side boosters we can reuse existing Falcon 9s, but we need to just replace the interstage with a nose cone, and it needs to use the upgraded titanium grid fins, which are sweet. Those worked out real well. I'm really happy about those. In fact, I'm glad we got the side boosters back because they had the titanium grid fins and the center core didn't. So if I was to pick anyone, I would have picked the side boosters. I'd pick the center core to explode. So that would be like the least. Yeah, those freaking grid fins they're super expensive and awesome, but the production rate on them is slow. We need them back. That was the most important thing to recover were those grid fins.
Sensors inside the spacesuit testing like its ability to function? Nope, it's just
Nope.
up there?
Yeah, no, it definitely works though. You can just like jump in a vacuum chamber with it and it's fine.
Elon, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so very much
All right.
for your time. Really
All right, thank
appreciate
you.
it.
All right, thanks everyone. Hope you had a good time. Lots more excitement coming.